Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you for Firki's two-day workshop. Before we begin with the session today, let us take a moment to get to know each other a little better. I can see everyone sharing their introductions on the chat box. But again, kindly introduce yourself in the chat box. Tell us where you're joining us from, what do you do, and one unique tradition or a saying from your culture that you love, right? To get us started. For example, I love the tradition of langar at a gurudwara. So basically, because it is a free community meal and a beautiful expression of equality and kindness for everyone. So just share in the chat box and introduce yourself, where you're joining from, one unique tradition or a culture from your um, place. Thank you, Sankeet from Mumbai, Vandana from Raipur. Hello, Kritika. Hello, Savitri. Nitesh from Shiv Nadar School. Just take a moment to read through each other's introductions as well in the chat box. It's amazing to see how we are coming from different locations, different cultures, and backgrounds. All right. So, learning and exposure for teachers and educators have been an inspiration behind Firki workshops. You can go through different workshops, webinars, learning paths conducted on the portal. The link to the same will be pasted shortly in the chat window soon. We believe that your time is valuable and hence we want to acknowledge your presence in this workshop. Therefore, we would be providing our participants with a certificate of attendance. This is made available to all participants who attend all the days of the workshop. We will share more details on how to fill out the feedback form and access the certificate on day 2 of the workshop. You can join a Firki workshop on two platforms, Zoom and YouTube. We are live on YouTube as well. So the YouTube live link will be pasted shortly in the chat window. Now I will take you through a few features on Zoom that you can use to have an engaging and productive session. So this is the mic button. You can click this to keep yourself muted. Unmute only if the speaker asks you to. This is the video button. You can switch on and off your video with. You can share your questions and thoughts in the chat window. I will be here to curate your questions and share them with our speaker. Very importantly, please rename yourself as your full name, since only then we will be able to track your attendance for the 2 days and provide you with the certificate. Here are the steps to follow to rename yourself on Zoom. Kindly do this with me if you have not done this already. So if you are joining from laptop, click on the participants button located at the bottom of the Zoom window. This will open a panel on the right side of the screen showing a list of all participants. In the participants panel, locate your name in the list, hover over your name and click on more button that appears. Select rename from the drop-down menu. Enter your new name in the pop-up window and click change or OK or rename or done, whichever option is appearing for you. However, if you're joining from mobile, you will see a screen like this shown on the screen. Click on the participants button located at the bottom of your Zoom window. I request participants to stay on mute. Thank you. You will see your name in the participants panel. Click on your name. Select rename from the drop-down menu. Enter your new name in the pop-up window and click on OK or Done. If you find challenge in doing so, kindly share in the chat box. We will help you. After the workshop, we would encourage you to talk to people around you about what you learned today. We remember best when we share our learning with others. Practice learning from the workshop in your work. You can access the certificate and resources on our Firki website and Firki app both. Kindly note that full participation is required on both the days, that is today and tomorrow. So please ensure that you are present for all the days to receive a certificate. You can attend next Firki workshop or a webinar, and you can get updates on our Firki website for so. That brings us to the end of the pre-workshop presentation. Let us begin with the workshop now. So now that we are all settled in, it's time to deep dive into the session. We are delighted to have you join us for today's episode titled Shaping School Culture. It is a 2-day workshop, and today is the day 1 of the workshop titled Culture by Design. I am your host Deepika. I work at Firki. I will be your guide for this workshop to help you navigate through it. As we move to the workshop, I have a few requests for our participants. We request you to keep your cameras on for effective interaction. To avoid disturbance, we request you to keep your mics on mute unless the speaker asks you to unmute. Use the chat window to ask a question or raise hand to share something. Participate enthusiastically throughout the session. Take notes actively to capture your learnings. Kindly avoid annotating on the screen. The recording of the session will be made available on the Firki portal. We request you to keep this a non-judgmental space by respecting each other's views and experiences. And most importantly, stay curious, open, and willing to learn from one another. Please take a moment to see on the screen what the National Education Policy NEP 2020 states about school culture. It emphasizes the importance of creating an inclusive, safe, and supportive school culture as foundation for holistic education. It calls for all participants in the school education system, including teachers, principals, administrators, counselors, and students, to be sensitized to the requirements of all students and create an empowering educational culture. NCF 2023 states that a positive and inclusive school culture is fundamental to meaningful student learning and development. Please take the next 30 seconds to read about the impact of school culture on student learning. To summarize, NCF highlights school culture as a crucial foundation for learning, fostering both a supportive environment and the development of values essential for achieving curricular goals. It's time for the highlight of today, our incredible speaker. Meet Sitara. She's a passionate advocate of educational equity. Over the past decade, her journey in the education sector has included working as a teacher, serving as an instructional and curriculum coach, and initiating the school transformation project. She now serves as the head of education strategy and learning at Crystal House, India. We will hear more about her role from Sitara herself. Personally, what strikes me most about Sitara is not just her depth of experience, but the heart, clarity, and vision that she brings to everything she does. So, without further ado, let's give a warm welcome in the chat to Sitara. We hope you all have an interesting workshop. Sitara, we are so excited to learn from you today. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Deepika. That was such a lovely introduction. And a big hi to everyone over here. It was amazing to see the number of states or countries that we're coming from. And I'm so excited that so many of y'all are curious about school culture and interested in this topic. Just give me 1 second. I'll just share my screen and we can get started. Okay. Deepika, is the screen visible? Okay. So just like Deepika said, this session is about culture by design. And what I want to say that means is basically a lot of people think that culture is something that already exists, right?
Sitara, you're on mute.
You're muted.
Yeah.
Hi. Yes, thank you. Can you hear me now? Sure.
Everyone will get a
Can the rest of you please stay on mute? Participants, please mute yourself.
Okay, thank you everyone for muting. So we'll get started with this session, and I just wanted to explain the title a little bit. And the title says Culture by Design, right? What that means is the fact that you can intentionally create and design culture, and it's not something that already exists, which will just continue the way it is. So through this workshop, we're going to understand a little bit more about culture and a lot of other aspects in terms of how you can design it. So before that, I would just like to share a little bit about myself. I think Deepika already did mention it, but in terms of my educational journey, it started at Teach for India. I joined them as a fellow, and then I continued as a program manager. So those are just some of my students and some of the teachers that I was coaching as a program manager. After that, I joined Crystal House India as a curriculum and instructional coach. And post that, I actually created a school transformation plan and gave that to the CEO. So I was telling the CEO that, you know what, our school is incredible, but we can actually take it from good to great. And there were four buckets in that. The four buckets were culture, teaching and learning, of course, because majority of us are in the education space. Then there's parents as partners and leadership. Right. So it's because I've been doing this work for the last like 5 years that I can really share whatever I am in today's session. So once I started the school transformation project, I worked a lot on culture, leadership development. Then I became the head of education strategy and learning. And I work with two of our schools. One is in Bangalore. These are the Bangalore teachers that I work with. And similarly, we have another school in Raipur as well. So about like 75 to 80 teachers in Bangalore and about 64 in Raipur. Okay. Before getting started with the session, I just put this picture to say thank you. Thank you to everyone who's taken the time from their busy schedule to be part of this webinar. And thank you also because it means that you care about people, right? The minute you care about culture, it shows that you care about school, you care about students, the staff, and a lot more than just the results. So if it was an online workshop, I would ask people to pat themselves on the back for being so amazing. So those of you who want can do it. Okay, so we'll start our session with a poll question. So Deepika, if you could just help me with that.
Yeah, the poll is launched.
Thank you. So what we would like for you to answer, and please be completely honest, which of the following do you think impacts student outcome in a school? Okay. Is it curriculum, the way we do assessments? Is it the teaching and learning or the school culture? Is it leaders? Is it the family? Or is it all of the above?
We have 70% of responses. Take the next 10 seconds to respond if you haven't. Okay. So I'm ending the poll. We have 80% people.
Sure.
Here are the results.
Okay, very interesting. So 70% of us said that all of it matters. The next highest would be school culture. Oh, okay. Very nice. 14% said that. Teaching and instructional quality and a bunch of other answers. Okay, but 70% of us actually thought that all of these factors impact student learning, and I completely agree with that. Now we have a follow-up poll question. Now we know that all of these play a role in impacting student outcomes, but let's see what we focus on. What do most schools focus on? And those of you all who are not from schools, you can just think about what do most organizations focus on. Would it be like core work or other aspects?
The second poll is also launched.
Right. And again, please be completely honest here, like based on your experience working in a school, what do you think leaders in the school management gives most of their energy and attention to? Is it curriculum, assessments, teaching and learning, their own development, culture, family engagement?
Kindly take the next 10 seconds to reply to the poll. Okay, so I'm ending the poll now. Done.
So 40% said all of the above. The next is teaching and no curriculum planning and alignment, teaching and instructional quality, and a bunch of others. Okay, that's also very interesting. From my experience, what I feel like most school leaders and managers focus on would probably be the top three, is what I would say. So, a lot of time goes into curriculum assessments and teaching and instructional quality, and maybe slightly less compared to others. But of course, all of us could definitely have different experiences. So, coming back to the session, one second. Okay, so what we are going to focus on is not the first three. So I know Firki has a lot of other workshops in terms of curriculum, assessments, and I'm hoping you all have attended that. I'm sure you'll have coaches as well in school. Today's session is going to focus on two things mainly. One is how do we shape staff culture, and how do we shape leaders as well to be really good proponents of the culture. And most of us in schools, our major focus is on what? The students, right? It's always about the students because the students are at the heart of everything. But through this session, what I'm hoping that we understand is that, of course, students are at the heart of everything, but equally important are the staff members or the other teachers and the leaders because of this reason. So, if we want students to thrive, we must first ensure that the adults around them thrive first. Right? If the teachers in a school are happy, if they have good well-being, they feel really fulfilled over there, then they in turn will be able to give their best to the students. Can I quickly see a thumbs up maybe or any expression if you all agree with that? That for us as teachers to give our best to students, we also need to be taken care of. Okay. Now, similarly, even in terms of leaders, a lot of times when we look at leadership development, we're looking at how can leaders manage the school really well. We look at how can they do observations and give feedback, right? But there's more to leadership than that. So like this quote says, and Simon Sinek, I'm sure a lot of us have heard of him, and he's absolutely brilliant. So he was talking about how leadership is not about being in charge, it's about taking care of those in your charge. But again, oftentimes leaders don't get any practice or experience with that. Right? So in today's session, we're looking at how we can really look at these two aspects. So what we're going to explore are the various factors that shape staff culture because we're focused on the majority of the teachers and instructional coaches or anybody else who's in school. Then we're looking at the barriers to culture. And this can be definitely applicable to organizations as well. It does not necessarily have to be in a school environment. Once we very quickly understand that, we're going to go into the crux of this, which is how do we actually shape culture? And something I really want to call out, because I think a lot of us might be teachers in this group, is that you don't need to be a leader to start bringing about a change in culture. right? And post this session, I'm hoping that y'all will be the culture champions who goes back to your leadership team if you're not a leader and says that, you know what, I want to work on culture. I know how I'm going to go about it. And that's really going to benefit how us. And this is how we can do it. Right? That's literally what I did at Crystal House. So I was not officially a leader as yet when I suggested this, but they gave me that opportunity. And now I'm part of the main leadership team. Okay, so while we look at the steps involved in shaping culture, we're going to look at a few tools and frameworks that I've used and also a few sessions that I've conducted. And hopefully, y'all can also use that in your respective schools and organizations. Okay, would love for y'all to put in the chat box in terms of what you think are the major factors that influence or create culture in an organization. Anything that you think shapes culture. So it could be if you feel that leadership culture, you can put that down. If you feel that the vision of the org shapes culture, vision of the school, you can put that down. Okay, I can see a lot of quick answers. Vision, mission, CEO, school philosophy, consistency, attitude, gratitude, management. Yeah, all of these answers, goals, mission, vision. Perfect. Right. Okay, brilliant. So what all of you all are saying is definitely correct. And there are so many factors that influence culture, right? We're just going to look at a few of them. So the very obvious ones, which are above the iceberg, are what you all mentioned. So vision and mission for sure. The strategy, systems, and processes that a school has or an org has. The org structure and the leadership team definitely influences culture, as do the policies, right? Whether it's the leave
महाराजा
taking
हमें थोड़ी देर
policy,
एसी
admission
चलाना तो चला दो, नहीं
policy,
फैन इधर का तेज करना तो फैन तेज।
it could be any of those things as well. But what's really important and what shapes it to a much deeper degree are other aspects. So, for example, one is definitely the power dynamics and emotional climate. And I did see some of y'all had mentioned that, right? Like trust. So, do teachers in that school really trust each other? Do they trust the leaders? And do all the leaders in the school trust each other as well? Is there a lot of power dynamics at play? Or is it really an environment where anyone can speak up and be valued for it? Or do the leaders expect them to be the decision makers and the others just have to follow what is there? So, all of that influences culture a lot. Another very important aspect is the unspoken norms. So, these are what gets praised, condemned, or tolerated, or even ignored. Okay, here, what I mean by unspoken norms are, for example, imagine that we're all in a staff meeting. And as our culture or in our policy, we're saying that it's an open door policy, anybody can ask questions, right? But somebody asks a question which goes against something a leader says. Do they get kind of yelled at? Like, are they made like fun of, ridiculed, or are they really encouraged? Are they celebrated for asking something that goes against the norm? Right? So those are what we mean by unspoken norms. I think a lot of you all touched upon this as well. Another big factor that influences culture is the assumptions and beliefs of all the people in that particular school. So it could be assumptions about teaching, assumptions about learning, leaders, students, any of those. Do we really believe that students have potential? Do we really believe that if we work together, we can do better? Right? Or do we want to be the singled out ones who are like praised for everything? So all of these aspects shape culture. And last but not the least, attitude towards change and feedback. Okay, these are just some, there are a lot more, but I've just put down the ones which, in my experience, really have a huge influence. If anybody else feels like anything major is missing, please put it in the chat box. And I think already all of you all have done that. I love this quote. You know, when you talk about culture, it's not about what's in the fancy posters with cute pictures, right? School culture is not what we say on the walls, it's actually what people feel in the halls. What do teachers feel in the staff room? What do they feel when they go into the classroom? When they attend a staff meeting? All of that is what shapes school culture. Okay, now coming to the barriers to culture. Again, there could be like 40 to 50 barriers for sure, but again, in my experience, these are like the top 5 to 6 ones. So one is lack of shared vision. See, all of us in schools and all, we have a clear vision of the org. But do we have a clear vision of the culture that we want to create? Do we have a clear vision of how we want teachers to be with each other, how we want leaders to be with each other and with teachers? Right? And most often the answer is we don't have that. Um, Another thing is definitely misalignment between stated and practice values, which I kind of gave the example of earlier. We're saying feedback is welcome, but the minute somebody criticizes us, we put them down. Right? So that's misalignment between what we're saying we value and what we actually value. Inconsistency in leadership behavior. Now, for example, in our school, we have 3 deputy principals, right? Do all the 3 deputy principals believe in the same thing? Do they have the same vision? And are they all working towards that? Or is each leader trying to do different things, which leaves the staff really confused? Right? That also often happens. Low trust, which a lot of you have mentioned in the chat box as well, trust being a major factor. And finally, and this is something which I faced, is just change fatigue. Okay, so when I was like, come on, we can do this and let's create a beautiful environment where we're all happy to come to school. A lot of them were like, what one more thing we have to work on? We have lesson plan deadlines, we have tons of corrections, that's more than enough. I can't really work on anything else. Right? You're just like really exhausted, and you could be exhausted with change as well. New teaching and learning methods, new assessment methods, project based learning, so many things. Right? They might not really want to focus on culture. Okay. So now we know the barriers, we know the factors that influence culture, but we really can make a difference. Okay. And I've tried and tested this out in both our schools, spoken to a lot of other people who've used some of these practices as well, and there has been a change. So there are totally 5 steps, and this is not from a framework. Like these are what I've realized in hindsight. So I'll share that with you, and we'll go deep into each step. So the first one is in terms of getting buy-in to make this shift, because there are so many other priorities. So we look at that first. And for us to really understand the current reality. What is our school culture like honestly right now? Okay, once we know that, we need to align in terms of what we want to see change and really define the change in a clear manner. Now, the very interesting part is the first two you'll find in most frameworks, and it's very obvious. What's very, very, very important is making it personal. Can each person in the school or in the organization understand how they make an impact to the culture? Okay, so for me, that's my favorite part. So we'll come to making it personal. And similarly, skill building also. That, okay, now I know I impact culture, but how do I really change? How do I build my skills in terms of culture? And finally, it's not a one time process, right? Like it has to be ongoing. So we look at how we can make it an ongoing process. So, like I was saying, for me, the most interesting ones are making it personal and skill building. So, we'll quickly go through the first two and come to that. What's very important in terms of all the steps is doing it side by side with teachers and with the leaders in a school. Okay, before we come into the steps though, like there's one very important prerequisition that was required for that, which is for us to really commit to working on the culture. Okay, and what I mean by that
Can be possible.
is
No,
okay, somebody is giving instructions, no problem.
no, ma'am. What the?
Okay, so what do I mean by committing to working on culture?
No, we don't.
What that means is that we as a school or as an organization have to be willing to make culture a priority. Okay, that means that we need to be willing to spend time and effort on this. And I put that picture down. What that means is basically this is once in a month, I work with a lot of leaders and it's all culture related sessions. And that's a commitment that a school has actually decided to do. So these particular people, like I work with the principals, deputy principals, instructional coaches, heads of departments, all of them. But we intentionally sit and brainstorm and do exercises linked to that, which we'll get to know. Okay, but we need this commitment from our school for this. I'm sure a lot of y'all know this quote by Rita Pearson, right? And she's one of my favorite educators, and I love her TED Talk. So just like she said that every child deserves a champion, like my hope is all of us in this call, like we become the culture champions, right, for our school, and every school deserves champions like us. And somebody will never give up in terms of working on what we can do better. Somebody who really understands the power of human connections. we're not working in an IT company, right? Like where tech plays the major role. We're in schools. So whether it's with students, whether it's with each other, with our parents, human connection is what is really important. So valuing that and making sure that all of us become the best that we possibly can be, which in turn will affect our school. Something I really want to say, and in case y'all are trying to make this shift in your school as well, is to make people understand that if we work on culture, it does not mean that there's something wrong with our school or with our org. It just means that we're trying to take our school from good to great, right? And that's exactly how I pitched it with the people in my team as well in our school. Because all of us are doing really good work. I'm sure we're doing our best, but we can always take it one step higher and take that leap. Okay, now assuming that we have decided we'll be culture champions, assuming that we have spoken to the leaders or we are the leaders in school, if some of us are, and we have decided to take that step towards working on culture, let's see how we can go about it. So the step one is about buy-in and understanding current reality. So a lot of times when I told the CEO, for example, that I want to work on culture, he said, sure, okay, fine, ask the teachers what they feel, what they need, and we can get started. Right? This was after like telling him a little bit about my plans and stuff. But what I would actually suggest is don't go first with the teachers. First, let's try and understand the leaders themselves. Okay, so what I did was I spoke to all the deputy principals, instructional coaches. We all came together and we talked about what is working for them. So, what aspects of culture is happening really well according to them, and what are they struggling with, and what do they want? So, again, oftentimes in a school, for example, if I give you the answers that came about at Crystal House, the deputy principals were saying that they work so much with their primary school, middle school, and high school teachers, they don't get time to interact with each other. Right? So, they were actually feeling that they wanted more connection between themselves. They were also talking about like the expectations in terms of working at home and a lot of pressure that comes from the job. And of course, they spoke about the good things as well. But what all of this resulted in was the leaders itself was like, oh, you know what? Somebody cares about us. Somebody's asking about us. All the time, we are responsible for others, right? But for the first time, they felt that somebody's checking in with them. They felt really valued as well. And they understood the benefit of this process. Again, it's very scary if you're a school leader and somebody wants to work on culture and is going to talk to the teachers. You'll be scared of what is going to come, right? Are they going to say bad things about me? Am I going to be blamed for like the bad aspects of culture? But now when they themselves go through the process and they're able to share both what's working and what's not, they really understand the value and benefit of this. Okay, so once we have done that with the leaders, like simultaneously, we can also start with the teachers. So with teachers, we can do one-on-ones, and that's what I did. So in the Bangalore school, I spent about 3 months speaking to different teachers, and there's about 75 to 80 of them over lunch break, like different lunch breaks. In the Raipur school, I went there for 3 days and I covered like 60 teachers, one after the other, right? So it can be done in any manner. But if that's not feasible for any of y'all or for your school, what we can do is have small focus groups and discuss with teachers. Or the easiest option, but according to me, not the most effective, is you could also do a survey. Okay, but I would definitely recommend the one-on-ones because you get to understand a lot more in terms of what makes people happy and what makes people sad. If you're undertaking this exercise, what's very important is to always ask balanced questions. We don't want it to be a venting exercise, right? Not just going and saying, okay, what should we improve or what's not working. All you're going to get is complaints then. We do want all of us and we ourselves to be balanced in our perspective. Right? So always ask what's working, what's not. What are we doing well? What could we do better? Because even what we're good at is something that needs to be celebrated. What's also very important is to always close the loop. So even if you have taken a survey or done a focus group, it's important to share those results back with the larger group in terms of trends that you have seen. So they know that you're really valuing what they're saying, they have a voice and that their voice is captured. Okay, now if we feel like all of this is a little too formal and we want a slightly more easier way to ease into understanding the current reality, this is another thing that we can do, and that's something again we did as well. So a small circle time with different groups of teachers, just asking them to share two things, right? In a school, we all go through a lot of experiences. As students do, so do we. Now, in your last year, can you think about what made you feel happy? And can you also think about what made you feel sad? And we share that with each other, right? And here we did have a note taker in every group. So who didn't write the names of the people, but just wrote down the patterns. So something simple like this also can really give you an understanding of what's working and what's not in terms of culture. Again, very important when you're doing sessions like this, if you do them, please tell members not to share names of any staff member. And also, very important is they need to be talking about what made them feel happy and sad in with regard to working with each other. So, not like my students didn't do well or the curriculum was really hard to implement. Right? The answers that we got, for example, is what made me really happy is the fact that I got acknowledged for my work. Or what made me really feel sad is that I didn't get a lot of opportunities this year in my department. It could be anything, right? And then we see patterns and we close the loop. Okay, so now assuming that you've got a good enough understanding in terms of the current reality, you've understood the patterns, the next step is to look positively towards the future, right? To see what we want to create and define that. Now, there are 10,000 things that we can all work on and we all value, but what's very important is that we choose 3 to 5 aspects of what we want to work on as a school. Okay, and here it's not just what's not working, it should also be in terms of what we want to see. So, for example, if we find out that a lot of teams are not working very well together, collaboration might be something we want to focus on, right? And that's a reactive focus that we have. But a proactive one, for example, could be growth mindset. Like I want people in the future to really embody growth mindset. So that's what I mean by have a good
A
balance
good balance.
proactive. Okay. Now this
Okay. Now
also
this.
easy enough, but it is tough to choose 3 to 5, okay, because different people value different things. So definitely work with the leaders, some of the teachers to figure this out. Now, even if you have 3 to 5 aspects, it's very important to focus only on 1 or 2 values in a year. Okay, yeah, this is definitely going to get diluted. And for each of the values that you're focusing on, to have indicators which will ensure this common alignment. And I'll explain what it is to have indicators. So just to summarize, like definitely decide the top 5 things that you're going to focus on in the school, but pick 1 or 2 and make sure there are indicators. So at Crystal House, these are the 5 things that we chose as our staff values. Okay, we have separate student values, which is respect, responsibility, all of those. But for staff values, we wanted effective communication. We wanted to be continuous learners, so really focus on continuous learning. All of us really work with a lot of other people in our department's grade group, so inclusive teamwork. We are a school at the end of the day. We do want our students to get good results, really thrive, be able to make it really well in the workplace. So in the long run, so passion for outcomes is something else that we really valued. And integrity, right? Just being honest and good human beings. So these were the 5 that we chose. Now, what's very interesting is if I ask Deepika what inclusive teamwork means, she'll probably give me one answer. And if I ask Anu, she'll give me another answer, right? Each of us have different thoughts when it comes to all these values. They're very general. So what we need is common indicators. Okay, so these are statements that show what exactly we expect. So for example, for the value of inclusive teamwork, we are saying one indicator is that we are going to see all of us demonstrate acts of care, kindness, and support towards each other. Okay, so that's something that we really want us to see. So you'll see that these are action statements and they start with we because all of us need to be doing this, a teacher or a leader. Another one that we thought was very crucial for people to work together is to really value and express gratitude for the contributions made by our colleagues. And again, working in teams means you're going to get a lot of different ideas, opinions, and thoughts, right? So we definitely want to encourage that. So we said we also seek to include the diverse perspectives of our colleagues. Okay, so these are what we mean by indicators. So they have to be action-oriented statements. They show what exactly is expected. And ideally, I would definitely suggest starting it with a V so that it becomes really inclusive and it shows that all of us have to do this. I'll just pause for a minute and then we can go in case anybody wants to understand these. Okay. Now, in case you all want, we'll just do this very quickly. What would be really great is you all have not yet spoken to everybody, but you have a good sense of what's working and what's not in your school or in your organization, right? So if you want to just make a note of what you think are the key values or aspects of culture that are needed in your school, you could definitely do that in your notebooks. And once you do that, you could also write some indicators of that value. Okay, just if you all want to take 2 minutes to practice and synthesize, and we'll get started soon. I'll just give you all some examples. There's another example of effective communication. So our indicator at Crystal House is we respectfully and transparently communicate our ideas, expectation, and feedback. Or we demonstrate active listening and ask questions to understand each other. Okay, we'll just wait for another minute and then. Okay. Deepika, should we move on and people can complete it whenever they want? Sure. Okay, so we'll move on. And of course, feel free to come back and do this exercise whenever you want. Okay, now what's very important is all of this seems a little preachy, right? Like, oh, you know what, we're going to work on those 5 values, and people are not going to be very excited about it. So, what's very important is that we make it fun. Okay, so when we had those 5 values effective communication, integrity, passion for outcomes, continuous learning, and communication we introduced it with a fun egg drop activity. So, the challenge that was given, the outcome that we wanted from this was like people in their respective groups, they create a like device in which you can put an egg and you drop the thing, but the egg should not crack or break. Okay, so you can see different staff members doing it. It was a lot of fun. So we gave them certain materials, which is basically straws, balloons, newspaper, and sellotape. So that's about it. So you can see some of them with the egg. They all design different kind of crafts. And after they did this, and it's a very quick activity, that you give them a maximum of 10 minutes for this. I think teachers are brilliant, right? Like we just come up with things so quickly and so fast. After that, what we did was debrief all the 5 values using this activity. So we said, okay, what were the outcomes that we wanted and how did we work towards that? Then we checked whether they had to work inclusively in a team. Did they get diverse perspectives from team members? Right? Then we asked them, did you express gratitude? And a lot of them had not, because a lot of us forget to say thank you for ideas and opinions or help, right? So then we asked people to say thanks to each other. We talked about continuous learning because we try a particular thing and then we feel it's not going to work, so we adapt. Right? So using this egg drop activity, we actually talked about how all these 5 values that we're going to focus on is a part of our everyday. Okay, and then we said that the focus for this year is going to be one value because we'll do one at a time, and we had chosen inclusive teamwork. Okay, so now we're finished with understanding the current reality, making sure leaders understand the work that we're doing, teachers understand the work that we're doing. And we also looked at step 2, which is deciding what we want to focus on and defining that clearly in terms of indicators. Okay, now we'll come to the interesting part about making it personal and skill building. Okay, now the thing is, a lot of people, when it comes to any change, and definitely in terms of cultural change, feel that it's not their work, it's the leader's work, right? Like, I am great, other people need to work on themselves. It's not my job, right? And we think that if only this person, that person, this person does it, culture will be great. Okay, but that's the passive way of looking at culture. What we want to shift it to is the active way of taking ownership, which means that they understand that they also shape culture, that every single person in that school affects school culture. We want everybody to understand and take ownership of the fact that their actions matter. Okay, and that the change starts with them. That we're not going to wait for other people. Each of us are responsible and each of us need to actually be change makers. Okay, so now coming to how we personalized it for the leaders. This is an exercise I did with the deputy principals, and a few other people. And what was very interesting is, and you might resonate with this, is that different leaders definitely have different personality types, right? You might have one leader who is very excited and jovial and loves people and connections. But you might have another leader who's a little bit of a taskmaster, maybe somebody who just wants the results and getting things done. Often, a lot of us do not have like enough reflection or the capabilities to understand what kind of leader we are and how we impact our teams. Okay, so one framework that I used is called the DISC model of leadership. And it's not just for leaders, it can be used for anybody. So while I explain this, I would love for you all to make connections with yourself as well. So one kind of leader could be very dominant. So these people are very direct, they're very results oriented, firm, strong willed, forceful. Right? They're the alpha in the room. Like, I know how to get things done. I'll get things moving. Everybody listen to me and like chop chop. Right? So that could be one kind of leader. Another kind of leader could be very influential. So very outgoing, enthusiastic, optimistic, lively, all of that. Another leader could be, and I would fall into the C category, is somebody who's very analytical, reserved, who's very precise, like things done in a logical, step by step manner, right? Perfection is something which is a definite requirement, all of those aspects. Or you could also have a leader who's just very steady, like very even tempered, accommodating, patient, humble, tactful. And all of these different personalities have their pros and their cons. No one style is better than the other. You might have one style being more of a requirement based on the situation, but each style has its pros and the beauty behind it, and each style has its cons where they negatively impact people as well. Okay, so once the leaders understood this particular model, we ask them to reflect on these questions. So, first of all, which model, which category do I fall into? Then how does my leadership style affect the people in a positive manner? How does my leadership style impact people in a negative manner? And we all have blind spots, so definitely getting perspective from others also mattered a lot. Okay, so just to give you one example, now a person is very dominant. Now they impact the team in a positive manner by getting results, right? Like making sure there's clarity, making sure things move. But the flip side of that and how they impact the team that they work with in a negative manner is that they might not have a lot of voice in the team. People might not be very honest with them. They might not be sharing opinions. Or people might feel a bit suffocated, like they can't shine. Right? So all of these leadership styles has its pros and cons, and the leaders actually reflected on that, and others gave them feedback as well. So again, we're just going to take a pause, and we would love to understand which particular style do you fall under? Are you somebody who's a D, or somebody who's an I, or an S, or a C? Okay, so let's see this group, what majority of us are in. And I think Aparna has a question as well.
या मुझे ये पूछना था अ, अगर हमारा लीडर मतलब डोमेन्स में है तो क्या उसको वर्क करना चाहिए जो अदर कैटेगरी है ICS क्या आपको लगता है कि लाइक यही एक अच्छा है मतलब कैसे वर्क कर सकते हैं मतलब एज अ लीडर लाइक
Sorry,
ये सभी तो बेस्ट ही दिख रहे
Aparna.
हैं राइट
Sorry, Aparna, 1 minute. People, like guys, Deepika is actually going to send a poll so we can just see which style that we fall under. Instead of putting it there, let's just see the majority of us. And Aparna, I think I understood your question, but if Anu or Deepika, if you could tell me, my Hindi is not the strongest.
Yeah,
ओके
Deepika, can you once translate for everybody on the call?
या ओके
Ma'am, can you share your question again?
ओके सो माय क्वेश्चन इज एज अ लीडर अगर वो डोमेन्स पे है तो क्या मतलब कोई भी इन्फ्लुएंस है या चारों में से कोई भी है पर कभी कभी ऐसा भी होता है कि लाइक एज अ लीडर आप बहुत हम्बल हो तो आपके जो स्टाफ रहता है तो वो आपको कभी कभी वो ग्रांटेड लेने लगते हैं राइट कुछ भी चीजों में तो क्या फिर मुझे एज अ लीडर ये सोचना चाहिए कि मुझे डोमेन्स में से भी कुछ करना चाहिए या उसमें मुझे वर्क ऑन करना चाहिए तो एज अ लीडर मुझे ये चारों पर्सपेक्टिव जो दिख रहे हैं तो उसमें से मुझे बैलेंस रखना है एज अ लीडर राइट
Okay, I'll share actually. So what ma'am is asking is for everybody on the call. Ma'am is saying that sometimes if we are too humble, then people might push us over and they might take us for granted. So in
Right.
that case, is it so that we should approach it with the dominant style a little bit more, perhaps? Is perhaps being dominant the way to be in that case when if we are being taken for granted?
Right. Great question, right? And I think to answer your question, like what I would say is one, there's no one style which is better than the other. Now, suppose you know that you're in the steadiness category. If even if you're not a leader, you're going to think about how does being a steady person, the S category, help you, and how does it negatively impact you. So what you shared was it negatively impacts you because some people might like kind of dominate you or just push their views forward, right? So once we know which category we are going to see in my situation which category is required. So I think Smriti put that in the chat. So leadership is actually ideally we should all be fluid enough, right? I know when I should be dominant, but I know when I should take a back seat. So suppose Deepika, Anu, and I are in the same group, and I might be the CEO. But if Deepika is doing really good work, I should let her shine. I should make sure that she gets a thing and I don't need to be the one speaking all the time. So even if I'm D, can I be a little bit of S or be a little bit of I when needed? So similarly for you, like if you know that you're an S, you'll have to think about which situations would it be better if you actually showed up as a D, right? With certain traits. You can't change your personality overnight, but you can look at which aspects of those are really required. So do you need to be more direct with people when they step over you? Then maybe that part of D is what you're going to choose. Now, again, if you are a D and suppose you have a new program that you're launching, maybe you need a little bit more of the I trait, right? But the first and foremost thing is for us to be aware of where we fall, especially as leaders. We impact so many people, right? And again, as teachers, also, of course, we impact so many people. But the main point is for us to know which style we are. How is it helping us? How is it helping others? How is it negatively impacting ourselves? How is it negatively impacting others? And based on that, what do I need to change? And then consciously work on that change. Okay, so that's what we would want to do with leaders, and that was what we did as well. And it also gave people an avenue to share with others. Others, you can't tell a dominant person, you know what, you're so dominant, you never give anyone a chance. But once you have this framework, it's easier to have that conversation. Right. And I saw in this group, there's a lot of people with different styles, and that's great. And ideally, in a school, in an org, we do want a people with a mix of all that. Now, if y'all are leaders and you take this, and a lot of y'all are falling under D, what would be important is to see that, oh, what else are we missing out on because we don't have the C, S, and I? And what else, like, do we get more people who have that? Can we adapt a little bit more? I hope that answers her question.
Yeah. So thoughtful and meaningful. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much. That was a great question. Okay, so this was just one model that we did, right? Now, another thing that we can do as well, 1 minute, let me just get back to the screen, is another model called the ABCD model of trust. Okay, so this is also very, very interesting. Now, what it says is usually for you to be able to trust somebody or for somebody to be able to trust you, four aspects are important. One is ability. Are they good at the work that they're supposed to do? Okay, do they get results? Do they have the skills that are required? Do they have the necessary experience? And are they really, really good at their core work? That's ability. What's also important is believability. Is that somebody who you believe and trust in? Can you trust them to keep whatever you're saying confidential if it is necessary? Can you trust them to be humble enough to admit when they're wrong? Right? Are they sincere people? Do they really respect others? And if they do, then you have a higher level of belief in that leader or in that teacher. Another important aspect is connections. Okay, so you also tend to trust people who really care about you, right? Not just who are really great at their work, but if you feel that that leader really cares about you, you do tend to trust them a lot more. So those are leaders who listen well, praise others, show interest in others. And of course, also very important is dependability or reliability. Right? Do they do things on time? Do they say whatever they're committing to, do they actually follow through? Are they organized? Are they accountable? Okay, so these are four aspects that usually help us build trust. Now, again, quickly in the chat box, if you have to just choose top two things, all four are important, but what are the top two things that you really value in a leader? If you could just quickly write that, and I will take a look at that. Do you really value ability? Do you really value connections? Okay, ability, connections, D. Yeah, if we can just use that A, B, C, D, that would be really great, right? Connection, ability. Okay, lots of different answers. Now, again, this is something that we actually did, and we answered these two questions, right? And what's very important, like what was very interesting is usually the things that you value are what you are good at for majority of the cases. Okay, so for example, for me, I value ability a lot and I value connections because I really feel people matter, right? And we're human beings, we're not like machines. And that's usually what I am the best at as well. So that's something which again was very interesting for a lot of us. But what's also interesting, and you would have seen in the chat, right? Different people value different things. So maybe for me, A and C are really important, but maybe for Deepika, it is A and B. And for Anu, it is C and D. So different people value different things. And again, just like Smriti had mentioned in the chat, as a leader, we need to mold ourselves to the different needs of the team. Okay, so if I'm somebody who values ability and say dependability, but my team values connection, they want to feel cared for, can I understand that as a leader, that might be a red spot for me? I need to work on that. Okay, so this is again another framework called the ABCD trust model, which we can use. This is also very good to, do with your team. So suppose you're part of an English department or a science department. This is something that you all can use there to have these conversations, to understand people at a deeper level. Because often we know it subconsciously, but we're not very consciously aware that why do I connect more or trust X more and not Y? So frameworks like these really help us get that example. Okay. Now it's not just leaders who need to be aware of things and shift things, right? It's also the teachers. So now let's look at how we can personalize things for teachers. So for us, inclusive teamwork was the value and focus last year, okay? And when we spoke to the domain experts and HODs, what they were saying is, you know what, Sitara, like it's really difficult to work in a team. Like it's great. We all know collaboration is key, but there are so many different kinds of people, right? And how do we bring awareness of that? So then we created this thing called the kinds of characters in a team. Okay, there are a lot more, but these were some of the ones which we kind of tailor made. So I'll just give you a couple of examples. So the alpha one is largely a D person, so the one who wants to be in charge, like the leader of the group, even if they're not a designated leader. Right? And soda bottle, for example, is a person who's very excited in the beginning, like, yes, come on, we can do this, but they lose their fizz very fast. They don't follow through on things. Because as I'm giving examples, like it would be great if you could make connections to do you have people like this in your group or which one are you like also. Now the particular one, so that's me again, very, very particular, right? If I look at a PPT, I'll see where all the typos are. There's no full stop here, no capitalization. I need things done in a certain way. Roller coaster, for example, is a person who has a lot of ups and downs. Some days they're coming to school really enthusiastic. The next day, they're completely down, very mellow. Again, super happy, but again down, very unpredictable. Right? So, like that, we looked at each of these characters, and this is something I did with the teachers. Right? So, in a fun manner, we looked at all these characters, and then we asked them to choose which character do they resonate with the most. Okay, now again, similar to what leaders did, then they think about like because of whichever character they are, whoever they are, even if you don't resonate with any of these, each of us impact our teams a lot. So then we're going to think about how do I help the team that I work with and how do I hamper the team that I work with. So this is an exercise that every single department did, science, math, commerce, English, everyone, and was really good for them to think about it and share. They didn't share the answers to the first question, only the second and third. And then each one committed to taking one personal action step based on how. So I did that along to be very honest and vulnerable. I am the particular one, right? So how I help the team is I make sure that a lot of good quality in whatever we did, right? So that's a reflection I had. People told me that. So my one action step was that can I keep things which are a little more low stakes and be not particular about every single thing. So they said like differentiate between what you need to be really particular for and what you can let go of, right? So that was one action step that I had to commit to, which would help my team. So this is another thing that we have done with teachers. Okay, so now we have looked at 3 steps. After we have aligned and defined it, like how each, like the basic thing we want people to understand through all of these, whether it is the disc model or the kind of character you are, is that each one of us, every single individual impacts the team. And every single individual impacts in a good way, but also impacts in a manner that may not work for others. And this itself was a big revelation because a lot of times we don't really look at ourselves critically, or we look at ourselves too critically, right? But we every time I'm going to repeat the word balance is key, right? So for me to understand how I help my team, how I hamper my team. Okay, so now let's go into the next part, which is the skill building. Now, a lot of this was about awareness, talking to each other, understanding it, but we need to actually begin to take action. Right? So for that, we need to look at the various challenges that we face, the impact of those, and then look at what we can do to practice or skill build ourselves. Okay, if I could just request everyone to mute. Thank you. Okay. So now, when you look at leaders, a big thing that leaders have to do is have difficult conversations, right? Teachers not uploading lesson plans on time, maybe another person taking a lot of leave, somebody not doing their duties. All of these are situations that our leaders have to face. But it's very tricky to actually have a productive conversation, which is very difficult in nature, which is more critical in nature. Right? So again, we did skill building on that. So a beautiful model is something called the coiled model. So let me, before jumping into that, let me give you a non-example. Okay, so I'm just using Deepika's name again because she's somebody who I got to know the last few days. So imagine Deepika has not done her lunch duty. And I just call her very quickly when she's running to class. I'll be like, hey, Deepika, you didn't do your lunch duty today. That's totally not acceptable. Make sure you're there tomorrow, okay? And I go. Now, what we're saying is that happens a lot, right? When somebody's in a rush, you just quickly tell them what is needed and you move on. But we're saying there's a better way that we could actually handle that conversation. And that's where this model comes in. So here, first, what is important is that you make sure that you set the scene and connect with that person. Make sure they have the time and they know what you're talking about. The second point is to give your observations in a very clear manner without making any judgments. Okay, then we talk about the impact of whatever has happened. And then definitely listen. In my previous example, I didn't even listen to Deepika, right? I just caught her, I told her what I needed to, and I'm moving and she's gone to class. Okay, but I ideally should listen to her, establish a solution, and reach a definite agreement. So, very quickly, if I was to redo the same example, what I would do is probably say, hey, Deepika, can I speak to you a minute about duties? Okay, that helps her understand and mentally prepare herself. So, she knows I'm going to talk to her about lunch duty. Then I'm going to say, I noticed in the last week you were not there for your lunch duty on Tuesday and Thursday. The result of that was like 2 students got into a fight and one of them had to be hospitalized. So I was just wondering what happened, right? So I've made the connection, I've stated my observation, and I've made her understand the impact. Then I'm going to pause and I'm going to listen to Deepika. So maybe Deepika tells me she had a blinding migraine. She was just not well. Okay, she had a really, really bad headache. So then I'm like, okay, sure, I understand that, but can we look at a solution because lunch duty is really critical for our school. So if you have a headache, next time could you come and tell me so I can assign somebody else, right? And I'm also going to check that if a migraine is a recurring thing, what is she actually doing as a solution for that? So then we establish a solution and reach a definite agreement, which is that she tells me in advance if she can't do her lunch duty. Okay, so this, but the more you practice it, it's much easier and quicker. You don't have to think about step 1, step 2. It just flows naturally. So that's a skill building exercise that we have done with our leaders.
Hey, Sitara, I could not hear the last example you shared. I'm really sorry, I'm asking you to repeat. but I missed out on that one.
Sure, you want the actual way to do this?
I'm asking you for this example. You shared that there was this teacher who was not showing up in the lunch break, and how did that conversation go?
Right. So you were able to hear the non-example, right? The incorrect way to do this. You want me to
Yeah,
share
when
the...
she rushed in and she said that, okay, this is it. Yeah, that I heard.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the correct way, if I follow the steps, one is for me to just connect with Deepika quickly and say, tell her what this is about. So, hey Deepika, I wanted to talk to you about lunch duty. Okay, I observed that on Tuesday and Thursday, you were not present for the duty. And as a result of that, a few students got into the fight, or a few students did not get back to class on time. Whatever I saw as the impact. Then I'm going to pause and listen to Deepika and ask her what happened. So I was talking about, maybe Deepika told me she had a bad migraine, right? So after I've listened to her, I established a solution with her. So saying that, okay, I understand, but going forward, if you have a migraine, can you please make sure that you tell me in advance so I can assign another teacher to that duty? And also, what can we do to ensure that like the migraines are minimized? Is it a recurring problem, for example, if it was, right? And then we have the clear solution and an agreement. So this is the ideal way to go about it. And it just takes an extra minute or two compared to the first example, but it makes a world of a difference. Now, you don't have to use this only if you're a leader. Even if you have to have a difficult conversation with a colleague, you can definitely use this. Right? Somebody didn't share their PPT with you, or somebody had another plan and they didn't let you, or somebody didn't tell you about a meeting. Definitely, you can use this model without calling out the names. Like you can just prep and do that. Okay, so moving forward, another thing that we thought was also for teachers, right? Like now, teachers also need skill building in terms of various things. So, what we did was a very interesting thing where we looked at actual problems that are happening and we made case studies based on that without any names, of course, just using random names that don't exist. Then we made teachers into groups, asked them to read the case. They had to explore why people acted that way based on the case study, and they reflected on the feelings of the people involved. Okay, what was the impact of their action and what other ways they could have handled it. I'll give you an example, it'll make more sense. So, this is an actual one which we used. So, something that we found is we had once upon a time had this thing called Star of the Month. Okay, but what we realized was it was backfiring a little bit because whoever got the Star of the Month were actually saying that they were getting treated a little differently by their colleagues. So, this was one such example. So, Rohini received an award from the school. She noticed that some of her colleagues started treating her differently after she got the award. Okay, and these colleagues went around telling other people that, you know what, Rohini did not deserve the award. She got the award not because of her work, but because she's very good at projecting herself very well with the leadership team, or she's close to the leadership team. Okay, so this is an actual thing which happened with various people. We put it into a case study, and teachers in their various groups had to answer these questions. Now, why do you think other people spoke behind Rohini's back? And different groups came up with different things, right? So people might be feeling jealous, people are feeling threatened, people like so many things like that. But it was very interesting when they had to pause and reflect in terms of why somebody talks behind somebody else's back. Then we talked about how would Rohini feel when the colleagues are treating her differently and when he hears such things are being said. We looked at the impact of that. So the impact of that is people don't want to be recognized. People don't want to stand out. People may not want to do good work because they fear peer pressure. It's there even with us adults, right? And we looked at alternate ways of handling this. Now, suppose you genuinely felt that Rohini did not deserve the award. Instead of talking behind her back, what else could you do? Right? So they came up with solutions like ask Rohini why she got that award, ask the supervisor, or share your concern with the supervisor. But we don't need to share it with other colleagues behind her back. Okay, so this was just one example. So, like these, like we actually used proper case studies of what was happening. And suppose whoever there were 5 to 6 who were speaking behind their back, when they hear it being discussed without their names, but they hear that, oh, it's because of jealousy or because of something, it creates a lot more of awareness, right? And when you look at the ways of handling it, that is the skill building part. How else could I actually deal with this? Okay, so this is another thing that we did. Like we just wanted to address issues head on. And again, it's made a world of a difference. So these are some examples of all of this, and we're coming towards the end, so there'll be time for questions also. I know somebody raised their hand. Now, what's important is while we're doing all of this, making it personal skill building, we have to make sure that it becomes an ongoing focus. We can't just do one session in the beginning of the year and leave it after that and hope the culture has shifted. It's definitely not going to happen, right? So, for us to make it an ongoing focus, what we have done as a school is we definitely have a minimum of 3 large group sessions with everyone, teachers, leaders, everybody in the school. Right? So that's the beginning of year, mid-year, and end of year. But the key to it, what made the difference, is that ongoing spaces. So again, all departments, English, Math, Science, they meet at least once in a week. We said that out of this once in a week meeting, at least once in a month, we are going to focus on org values. So in that meeting, because we are focusing on inclusive teamwork, there was space for them to express gratitude towards each other. There was space for people to share their struggles. Right? Imagine you've finished like a whole month and we are all in an English department and each one sharing what they struggled with. It could be with a student, could be with others. We're just listening to each other, offering help. For diverse perspectives, what we can do in that group meeting is share the troubles that we're having and get perspectives on how to handle it. Right? There are so many beautiful things that we can do based on the indicators, and we created space for that once in a month. So people understood the importance of reflecting, sharing, listening to each other, and it became it felt much more like a proper cohesive group. Also, very, very important, and we realized this after a few months, is don't just keep doing serious things like the sessions that I spoke about earlier, right? Also, make sure there's a lot of time for joy and celebration. Okay, nobody wants to keep self reflecting, how can I be better? Very important, but intersperse it with fun things. So, again, just sharing a couple of things that we have done. Now, for example, in one of these, we just told them that take these yellow chits of paper, write gratitude notes to each other in the department. Okay, so we did that. And then the Raipur school, they wanted to remember this act of the fact that we focus on gratitude. So they actually put that and tied that onto a tree near the entrance. So every day when they're walking into school, they see a whole tree filled with gratitude. And it's a reminder to be grateful to your students or to your colleagues. Another thing was just some fun. Again here, we just gave them very simple, doesn't cost much, right? Like this printout of a superhero. And suppose 5 of us on a team, we talked about each one's superpower. So suppose it's again Deepika, since we're using Deepika as our example. Anu, me, whoever else works with Deepika, we shared what we think her superpower is. So maybe I just say, I think your superpower is just kindness. You're just a lovely soul who radiates so much joy and empathy. Right? Somebody else might say your superpower is lesson planning. It could be anything, but we share that about each other. The person wrote it down and then use that as a bag tag. Now, it's also important not just to celebrate individuals in a group, but celebrate the group as a whole. So some of the pictures below, that's the math department, Kannada department. We just said make a chart which shows the top 3 traits of your department. Okay, so what do you think that you are and you embody as a math department, Kannada department? And again, everybody did this. So that gives them some time to think that, oh, all of us together, what are we really proud of ourselves for as a department? And then they made beautiful things, which we presented another day in terms of a station activity. So just make sure that there's a lot of time for all of that. And the teachers were so happy that we were focusing on gratitude at least every alternate month that they made cards for us, which is the one in the side, right? Like for all the leaders. They got together without telling us. They made these huge cards with lots of small notes and post-its inside and gave it. So it really, really created that culture of gratitude. What we also then realize is gratitude is not just for people in our department, not just for science department telling each other, but it's for us as a school. So we did this yarn activity where there's one head of department or any person over there and the department member sitting behind. And suppose I said something good about the English department, express gratitude to them, I pass the ball of yarn to them. They in turn talk to another department about what they're grateful to them for, and we make this interconnected web, right? And then we debrief that, how all of us are connected for our students. And if all of us rise, we do it together. But even if one link is cut, it's actually going to collapse. So we debrief that a lot. Again, what we realize is people just need us to create space for gratitude because it's such a tough job being a teacher. You're just running, correcting, managing misbehavior, doing 1,000 things, right? Giving people space to thank each other is more than enough, and they do it beautifully. Similarly, we realized that like it's not just enough to thank all the academic departments, our security, our fundraising team, our admissions team, our drivers, they're the ones in the middle. All of them are equally important. So we again made small cards for them and we did that. All of this is on our working Saturdays. And yeah, just like these are just some samples, but we created a lot of space for fun things and gratitude or joy, just games, all of that through the year, in addition to all the deep reflection. And coming to the end of my thing, I think we have more 15 minutes to go. What I did want to share is that everything was not rosy, right? It did not go really well and was not an overnight success. So some of the challenges that I definitely faced was lack of initial buy-in. Okay, so when we say that, you know what, let's make a difference, let's make it an environment where everybody is happy and excited to come, people are very skeptical in the beginning. How do we do it? Is it even worth the time? Or we can't change anything. This is how we've been, right? All of that. So lack of initial buy-in was definitely a challenge. Lack of prioritization. So suppose we had kept one Saturday to work on something, but suddenly some essay analysis has to be done, right? But making sure that you give enough time for both. Another thing was skill building of facilitators. So we did a lot of things in departments, which means that the head of department had to facilitate it. And while they're excellent with a lot of content, pedagogy, culture is something new for them. So we had to work with them in terms of how to facilitate sessions. And of course, all of this, it takes time to see results, right? You do one gratitude activity, it's not that a culture of gratitude has happened. You do 7 in a year, definitely it's going to change because people are more wired that way now to thank each other, even if you don't create the space. But it definitely does take time. And last but not the least, it's very difficult to monitor and evaluate it. You've taught students, 70% have got this concept, 20% did not get this, you remediate. But when you talk about culture, you can't say that we've shifted from this to this. You can feel it, definitely. You can see it, but I won't be able to give you concrete terms, right? So that was another thing. We'll just get to questions really quickly. But what I want to say is that though these challenges were there, there's been a lot of progress. Now, after years of working on this, there's definitely a lot of belief in the process, right? And it's become a part and parcel of our school programs. Now, anytime we're designing mid-year, end-of-year department meetings, we're immediately thinking culture as well, even if I'm not there to remind people. Also, because we did so many circle times, like what hurt me, like what made me feel sad, all of those things. How do I affect my team? All those things have led to a lot of deeper self-reflection. And we've normalized that, nobody is perfect. Like no leader, nobody in this world is perfect. We all have to grow and we're all beautiful in our own way as well. So there's a lot of increased openness to sharing and just vulnerability and honesty as well. And I just want to say that now it actually feels like I would say that staff definitely thinks that at Crystal House, that every voice matters and every person counts, right? Right from the security to the teaching staff to every single person. And you can't see that, but it's a picture of like the staff members coming together to make Crystal House India, but that's what it has resulted in. So that brings us to the end of this. If before we move into questions and before I just conclude, I would just love for some of y'all to take the next 1 or 2 minutes to either write an aha moment or a takeaway or an action step or anything which you found interesting. If you could just write that in the chat box, that would be great. And then we'll conclude and go into questions for sure. Okay, I think in the interest of time, okay, disk model A, B, C, D, all of those are there. In the interest of time, let me just finish with the conclusion as well. You all can continue chatting and then we'll have questions. So in conclusion, what I've really understood is that culture can be created even in existing schools, right? Our Bangalore school is like 20 plus years old and we did bring about a change to get us from good to great. So it can be created in any org in any school. What it takes is a shared understanding of what culture we want and where we are. It takes a lot of awareness and skill building to make sure that culture is really reflected in the daily actions. And it also definitely requires consistent touch points to keep it alive and evolving. Right? And the result, if we actually work on this, is a workplace where people feel safe, valued, and ready to grow. And once our teachers feel like that, once our leaders feel like that, that leads to really strong performance. Right? When they're happy, when they're self-aware, we can get our best for our students. So that is about it. And now we can get into questions, or if any of y'all want to share something that y'all have done which have really worked, we would love to hear that as well.
Hi, Sitara. I really enjoyed the session thoroughly, actually. I wasn't expecting this much insights, but glad that I joined. A quick question is, will we be receiving this deck on the portal? Because meanwhile you were sharing and explaining like each slide, I did not get time to note down everything. I did try to take certain screenshots, but I'm not sure if I was able to get the best of it. So will we get the deck?
Sure, I can definitely share the deck with Firki. I might just have to remove some of the pictures though, but I'll keep all the models and other points definitely there. Just because my colleagues are also there and all of that, right? And some of the
Yeah,
pictures.
sure. Even if it will be for temporarily there
Yes.
for because it's a 2-day program, maybe till
For sure.
tomorrow if it is there.
Yes,
Thank you
yes.
so much.
No problem. So all the models, all the other aspects, we'll definitely keep session ideas. Thank you.
Hi, Sitara. In step 5, what are the
Sorry, I'm not able to hear her.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, this is Rupa from Latika. In step 5, what are these acronyms BOY, MY, EOY?
I'm so sorry, my bad. That just means beginning of year sessions, mid-year sessions, and end of year sessions.
Thank you.
My bad, I should use full forms. Thanks for asking.
Thank you, ma'am, for the wonderful session. I was not expecting this much from the slides, which you clearly showed with the pictures, with all the things you got each and everything very clear. And here are many coordinated arts now they are launched. So I was expecting that something would be sorted out with the help of your structure, and we will do a meeting with that. As you mentioned that some all coordinator, principal, everyone has their personal perspective.
Yeah.
So we need to sit down and think and collecting. So there will be a positive solution for that, and I'm sure we will do that, and hopefully there will be a positive result.
Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. What's important is just creating space for us to be aware, discuss with each other, and I'm sure that will bring about a change.
हेलो मैम, अपर्णा हियर। तो जैसे लाइक आपने स्किल फोकस में टीचर्स के लिए कहा था कि लाइक आपने एक वो लंच ड्यूटी का एग्जांपल दिया था। यू गिव दैट लंच ड्यूटी एग्जांपल इन द स्किल फोकस, राइट? So when teachers have their fixed mindset on like behavior patterns, so how could address these, like how could address this?
With the teachers, if they have a fixed mindset.
Yeah, with the teachers. Yeah.
Okay.
In some aspect, they didn't accept our next steps or like debrief notes and like something next steps, and like that shift, how could we change?
Sure. So I think what we have found to be very useful is to actually have honest conversations and have difficult conversations honestly and respectfully. Okay. So, for example, like if there's a teacher who's just not listening to our feedback in terms of a particular class, us actually speaking to that teacher and saying that, you know what, I'm actually struggling to give you feedback because I feel like you might not be receiving it very well. I want to understand, am I doing anything wrong? Like that's an example for if somebody's not open to feedback, if you're giving it as an instructional coach. But coming to your answer in terms of the duties part, what is very important to understand is like the mindset behind it. Why are they not really doing it? So, do they believe it's not important? Do they believe it's a waste of their time? Or do they actually have any operational difficulties? And going into the root cause, saying that I want to understand actually what is stopping you. So, can you talk to me about that? And then taking it forward. But if it's an expectation, also being able to enforce that, saying that I understand you might not really value this, but it is really important for us as a school, and every teacher has to do this. So I would request that you do it, right? But just honestly speaking, understand root cause and communicating directly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Sitara. I'd raised my hand. Should I wait for my turn or can I
No,
speak?
I think you've been raising your hand for a long time. Please go for it.
All right. A wonderful session. So, a greedy question. How can we learn what you've shared in this session better and deeper? So, are there books or resources that you would recommend on culture building or leadership in educational institutions? That was
Right.
my first question. The second one is whenever you attempt change in an organization, that change itself creates a certain chaos in the individual, and that reflects in sort of upsetting or altering the status quo in the short run. And that disturbance to the status quo itself becomes a disincentive for that change to take root. So, how do you handle such situations?
Very insightful questions. Thank you so much for that. To answer your first question, there are definitely books that because I've done a lot of research on this. I can share a couple. I can give that to Deepika. I don't remember the names fully. One was Marshall Memo, then there was School Culture by somebody else. I'll definitely add that to the PPT as well. I can also link the DISC framework and other things for y'all and give that. Coming to your second question, beautiful question, right? And like you said, any change does cause disruption. What I think worked really well for us is normalizing that. So I constantly had this picture which says that we're all like this right now. When we're changing, it's all like fully mixed up and mashed up. And then again, we get into a good plateau. Right. So we had these conversations saying that there are going to be ups and downs, and we kept talking about this. So one fear that leaders had, for example, if we're all being very respectful, very mindful, will people take advantage of us? Right? And that happened in a couple of cases. But then we talked about that. We figured out how to address it. How do you differentiate which teachers can you be like very soft with, and which teachers might need a little bit more of a different approach. So it was just being aware it's going to happen, normalizing it, and talking about the mess that happened as well, and then waiting and giving it time for it to become like a flat line again.
Is
Yeah,
there
hi,
any
Namaste,
book of
Sarah.
difficult conversations? Is there any book for how to deal for the uh, difficult conversation?
For that, I didn't use a book actually. It's just the coiled method is something that I really use. There's something else called non-violent communication. So NVC. So that's another aspect that you can definitely use. So some of the tips are, for example, never use like you statements. Don't say you didn't do this or you made me feel bad. Always use I statements, right? I felt bad when. Like never judge the speaker. Like always talk about the action. So not like you are so disorganized. I can rather say that it would be great if you could arrange your things this way. Right. So, like, that's part of something else called a non-violent communication model. So, I can definitely add that in as well when I share the deck. I'll make a note of that. Um,
So Namaste, Sitara. Good evening and really a very insightful session. I just have one question which I'm not sure whether it's totally related or not, but I want to understand, are there any tools or frameworks by which I can able to understand what is the current culture of the institution? We are talking about the shifting of the culture, but
right.
before that, what is the culture? I'm at present, what is the status? Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, that's also a great question. And to be honest, when I first started with this, like you said, not to diagnose correctly, like what is the state currently, there are lots of like frameworks and questionnaires, but I felt like those were too generic. And what I felt was better was actually straight up conversation. What makes you feel sad? Ask everybody what makes you feel happy, what would you wish to change? And those are much smaller questions, but I felt like those led to a lot more humanistic insights. Otherwise, you have a set of questions which makes it a lot more business oriented and you don't get the depth of it. But that book which I recommend, they do have like a way in which you can diagnose. But my personal recommendation is just go with your heart. Just ask open-ended questions. What's working, what's not? What makes you happy, what did not? When were you hurt this year? And when did you feel really happy? Or when did you feel really proud, right? Just simple questions because people just need that avenue to share.
Thank you.
Yes, Tao of Coaching is a great book too. Somebody had mentioned that. Absolutely. That's a brilliant book, Tao of Coaching. Sorry, Kritika, I think. I'm not sure if she answered.
I
Also,
think
we're at time, so sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to say that we did not receive any feedback form for this one. Did you guys forget it, or is there no feedback form for today?
I'll share more details about it, ma'am. I think maybe like in the interest of time, we stop taking more questions. If you have more questions, you can reach out to Sitara. Like I'll share her personal email ID with all of you to gain more clarity on your questions. So thank you so much, Sitara, for sharing such great actionable strategies and real life examples. We really appreciate the clarity that you brought in and the depth you brought into the workshop today. Throughout the session, I could see the chat box buzzing with how participants were really enjoying your activities and found them so interesting and meaningful. So, participants, please stay confident that we would be uploading all the resources on the portal. So, you can definitely access them after the workshop. A big shout out to you all as well for engaging so enthusiastically throughout our session today. Um, and yes, let's all take a moment to thank Sitara for such an amazing and inspiring session. If you enjoyed the session, feel free to show some love with Zoom reactions for her.
Thank you so
Let
much.
it
All of you all
and
were absolutely lovely. Like, I love the questions, just seeing your faces, your engagement in the chat box. And yes,
yeah.
thank you so much.
Would request everyone to take the next 10 seconds to share Zoom reactions for Sitara. Uh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah. And please note that we will be providing our participants with a certificate of attendance, and this is made available to all participants who attend both the days of the workshop. We will share more details on how to fill out the feedback form and access the certificate during tomorrow's session, right? And we look forward to welcoming you all tomorrow for day 2 of the workshop. Until then, just stay tuned, take care, and stay curious. Yeah. Thank
Thank
you
you,
all.
Deepika. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening and rest of the night.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for the
Thank
session.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Thank you,
Thank
ma'am. Thank you very
God
much.
bless
Thank
you.
you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deepika, ma'am.
Thank you, and bye.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
I'm waiting for
All the-
tomorrow's session.
Yeah.
It's very insightful.
Okay, I'm ending the meeting now. Thank you all for joining.